guys, Volcano the Bat here, aka Chara. So, let's talk about the patches of 2021. I must admit, I didn't really know what to expect going into this year. I mean, all the main patches that were needed were, well, restored. And while there is still a lot more that could be done in the future, for the most part, they're all pretty minor. If anything, I'd say the patches that needed some updates from last year could be more of a focus than getting other patches. But we'll get into that in a bit. For now, let's go over all the patches we received this year.
Unlock snowboard control.
Man, how long has it been since players first tried Snowboard Sonic in this game and have wanted to be able to do something as basic as rotate properly? I think it is safe to say that pretty much everyone has wanted 360-degree movement. This alongside the air control, the better trick animation, and the better collision animation really just complete Snowboard Sonic now, at least at the bare minimum of what we should have received in retail. The one thing I found very interesting about having full control with the patch is if you look very carefully, you can kind of see Sonic is a bit snappy with his animations as he's turning left or right. It's one of those kind of elements that I always find myself going, oh yes, Pier 6, I'm so used to that, and now we've got it in the original, let's go. And oh, wow, okay, it's actually a bit different to what I was expecting, probably because I'm so used to how it is in Pier 6. I really don't know if this animation snapping is why they programmed it the way they did in the final. And not that I'm complaining, the main thing is that we can turn around properly now. So as far as Snowboard Sonic goes, I think we have got this in a pretty good state. The only thing that I can really see that could be improved in the future is really just to do with animation slots. And even then, it's just adding a landing loop animation after the trick animation plays. You know, super minor, because otherwise I'm pretty sold on this Snowboard take.
Disable title input delay.
So, I don't know about you guys, but this one really bugged me a lot. I mean, try to put yourself in my shoes. Being a modder of this game, the amount of times I need to boot into the game and wait 2 seconds every single time to be able to press start. And pretty much every time I'm spamming, waiting for the delay to expire to actually get into the game. Last year we got the new game and continue selections to appear. And who'd have thought there's also a delay for that? Albeit this one only lasted for 1 second, rather 2. But again, if you really put yourself in the shoes of a modder of this game, the amount of times you have to boot into the game, this can get pretty tedious after a while. This patch also removes a delay that really bugged me. Probably more so than most, but if you get rid of the Xbox guide,
Yes, this only happens on hardware and for 360.
you would have to wait a second. And if you're holding down on the analog stick, that's about half a second right there before it actually starts cycling, which to recap affects every selection where you can cycle, including new game and continue. So if you combine this with the guide delay, you have almost a 2-second delay for doing something as basic as closing out of the guide. Whether you're bringing it up to pause the game or to frame advance for speedrunning, again, this can get annoyingly tedious after a while. But now, thankfully this is all being removed. Currently, my only critique with this patch is mainly when you play this on hardware. Now, admittedly, when me and Hyper were testing this out, we were mainly testing on Xenia, and even when I would test it on hardware, this glitch happens inconsistently. But there will be the occasional time where I go to press start, and instead of bringing up the Xbox guide to choose which device you're going to load into for the game save, the press start logo just flashes. Once it's finished, that's it. The game basically is soft locked. And even if you sign out to try to reset the game, even that doesn't work, so you do actually have to get out of the game and boot it back up. In my coverage of the Levitate with Objects Still Held video, you can see just how frustrating it was for me, how many times I had to reboot the game just to do something as basic as let me in past the title screen. And to be clear, this soft lock can actually happen on Xenia, albeit not nearly as often as on hardware, but it still can happen. I think the reason this happens is because it's supposed to bring up the guide after the flashing of the press start animation finishes. But with this patch, it can actually bring up the guide immediately as you press start. So I think when it soft locks, it does this because it's trying to bring up the guide at a time when it's not meant to, which could explain why it rarely happens on Xenia since Xenia doesn't have the Xbox guide yet. But going back to the removed delay, I was hoping that by removing this 2-second delay for the press start, that it would also remove the 2-second delay for super switching. Because in a previous video I tried to show this, because yeah, basically, the float I found a while back that I briefly mentioned in the Patches of 2020 video, that controls the press start delay, also controls this super switching delay. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen here. It's times like these where I have to remind myself that these aren't memory edits that affect multiple codes. But well, at least we eventually got both removed. Levitate with Objects Held. That's beautiful. That, the one thing I was hanging out for is one of the earliest ones restored this year. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but either way, I am very grateful for this one. With that said though, god damn it, the original has gotten me so used to the original controls that I don't use it as often as I want to. Even after playing PR6 a lot. God damn you, Sonic Team. But yeah, it really is identical to what we see in the trailer clips, so yeah, I have no critiques. Have we done everything that Silver was intended to do in the original? Because I think the only thing that comes to mind in terms of abilities and his moveset is his speed up upgrade. I'm not sure how much of that code is left over in the final, if there's enough to fully restore it, or if it's too far gone. Either way, maybe we should look more into the Xbox Live Arcade demos code in case there's more code that retail doesn't have. I genuinely have no idea how that would have looked if it was just going to be the same as what we got, but he just runs faster, or he was going to have a dedicated animation, something like what we see in PR6. Perhaps this is where a lot of the unused Silver sounds would have been used. I really don't know. One thing I do want to comment on though is low-key, I actually wouldn't be surprised if this speed up upgrade was just the Lightdash for Silver. There is an abnormal amount of rings that can be Lightdashed in Silver's stages. His teleport dash, yes, while it does have dash in the title of the ability, in the files, the animation name is listed as Lightdash, which is exactly the title that's used for the Lightdash animation for Sonic and Shatter. So yeah, it really wouldn't surprise me if that was what they were planning, because outside of that, I really just have no idea what they would have done and how they would have done it. I guess there's always other gameplay quirks that could be restored, such as releasing the enemies without insta-killing them. Not just the Marketplace demo modded to play Silver, but even the E3 demo behaved this way. So I am pretty sold that this is what they wanted to achieve originally. Of course with working gravity so the enemies would actually fall upon release. Aside from that, I guess there's always other quirks like being able to grab enemies without stunning them. Conversely, being able to damage enemies with the stun. I could definitely see 2 of the 3 that I just mentioned being something people would want to use, but aside from that, I'm not really sure about the speed up upgrade. Who knows, maybe it's something Chaos could exploit in PR6's next release. Only time will tell.
Character gradients.
Man, this kind of haunts me because I have actually gotten character gradients to work in the past, but not in a state where I could actually roam around in gameplay. It was literally just with a black background and I couldn't even play. Well, at least for Shatter. In fact, I think it froze the game when I would do this. If I quickly switched the code around and back, I could get Silver's gradient to work in gameplay, but Shatter's,
The one gradient that didn't appear in the E3 demo.
I could never actually get to work in gameplay. And naturally, Shatter not being in the E3 demo, you can imagine my delight. But I think the thing that really haunts me about this is I didn't even put 2 and 2 together that this could have been Silver and Shatter's gradient.
Like, bruh, could you be any more oblivious?
It was literally me talking to Chaos and discussing whether or not character gradients should be implemented for PR6. It got me rewatching a lot of E3 clips based on the question, did it use 1 or 2 gradients? And after putting 2 and 2 together, that this silver looking gradient was the one from the E3 demo, and had Shatter been in the E3 demo, it would have used this. Yeah, that's when I freaked out. So yeah, this is the reason why a Shatter looking gradient was implemented to PR6 before we got it fully working in gameplay on the original. I think the reason this was cut is because the concept behind what they wanted to achieve, while it sounds great in theory, the amount of work that would have needed to be done for everything else, from the results to the pause menu to the hint box, might not sound like too much, but once you take into consideration that the main display sprites are just plain grey looking textures and are coded to show the gradients, both the main display itself and the outline, compared to what I just mentioned already being coloured in the sprite sheet and not relying on the game's code to colour it. And again, while it might not sound like much, we are talking about a game that was getting rushed out. But yeah, bummer that this was never even seen in the TGS06 demo, because that could have been the only chance we would have got to really see the Shatter gradient and officially. Same for this slightly modified version of the E3 loading screens. So the fact that we haven't, well damn, that's sad. I'm still not certain if Silver's gradient restored through this patch is identical to E3 Silver's, because it does appear to be a little different. And that could be one of 3 things. Either 1, the capture card quality from 06 is making it look different. 2, the E3 HUD mod is still a mod of the retail HUD trying to recreate the look of the E3's UI instead of accurately enabling the code to be used.
In the same way the E3 loading was enabled in the Xbox Live Arcade demo.
Or 3, the gradient actually is different. If I were to guess, I'd say both 1 and 2 are the reasons to why it color-wise looks a bit different. But at this point, who really knows?
E3 Savepoint Animation.
Who cares?
Yeah, for real, probably don't need to talk about this. Only reason I will is because if you hit the save point, travel a bit through the level and despawn it, then go back to said save point, you'll be able to re-trigger it. It's for this reason that I'm not certain if it accurately recreates the E3 save point, because I did go back to the compilation video, once again dissecting all the footage, just to see if there was anything where the player either hits a save point we've already seen triggered, or looks at a save point that should have been triggered, but hasn't been. Yeah, sure, at the end of the day, there's a strong possibility the player just jumped over it or ran around it, but given this result, I can't dismiss the impossibility. Regardless, something to point out in case we do receive footage in the future that behaves like this.
Lightdash with Y.
So I don't know, I really wasn't expecting this one for some reason. If you guys don't know already, Unleashed is my favorite Sonic game, and of course with the Lightdash being mapped to Y, I appreciate that this is now a thing in the original. It's definitely going to keep my muscle memory in check, so yeah, let's go. It's also fixed a lot of times where you jump and go to Lightdash and instead, in the original, would just bound down. Now, that's not an issue. Who would have thought something so basic in concept could change so much in the performance of gameplay? It also gave me an excuse to hurry up and fix my text mods, because for the longest time I had it saying use the Y button to do light dash in the shop, but the actual hints in gameplay that would say, hey, press this button to do the light dash, was still saying press X, and at that point the audio was also unmodified. I only have one critique at the moment with this patch. I can no longer light dash out of a spin dash, and I'm sure that's got something to do with it originally being mapped to the X button. In fact, if you hold down the X button when you've released the spin dash and you're on the move, it will cancel the spinning state. So much so that I can even see this being what happens when I go to light dash out of a spin dash in the original, because majority of the time I have to hold down to prevent Sonic from spin kicking. It isn't really a problem, more of just a nitpick if anything. But I guess this is another time where I've gone into Pure 6, gotten used to that, where you can light dash out of a spin dash, then we get a patch of said element from Pure 6 in the original, and it behaves differently to Pure 6. Can I also just mention that, for some reason, I don't know why, but Mark Speed Sonic was never programmed to have the light dash while in a jump. Wow. I mean, this is just as bad as Sonic with Elise not having a jogging state when you let go of the analog whilst you're running on the sand or water. Again, times like these, man. Thank God for PR6.
Nearly restored Rainbow Gem.
From what I've tested, it's coming along quite nicely. With that said, it still is a work in progress and still does need a bit of work, so that's why I'm not really going to talk too much about it here. I guess there's always next year, but while I'm here, I might as well talk about the Action Needs Replenishment. I don't know why, but this took me a really long time to install. Just this one patch specifically. I don't know what it is or why it is. There were times where it said it installed, so I gave it a shot, and then my results would be inaccurate to what was supposed to happen. So yeah, after a while, this can get pretty frustrating. Eventually I did come back and gave it another try, and thankfully I did get it working. And basically all the specifics that I mentioned previously have been fixed. The red and purple gem do drain at the right speed, and do cap where the gauge ends. The only semi-downside to this is the rainbow gem can't trigger anymore, but in all fairness, it never really worked to begin with. Even locking the animation at the end if spammed enough is an animation glitch, not a leftover code of the transformation. Let's just hope the restored rainbow gem patch will fix this currently not working rainbow gem here. Only time to tell.
All Amigos In Multiplayer.
So, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, this game did have plans for all the Amigos to be selectable in multiplayer. Definitely would have given some underused characters some more screen and playtime. But you see, I think this affects me more than it would others, mainly because I grew up on 06 multiplayer before single player. In a sense, it's kind of what got me prepared for single player, and I'm not talking about a few months, I'm talking years. I guarantee if I didn't play multiplayer in 06, I wouldn't have gotten into single player. So the idea that at one point I could have grown up with a version of 06 that had all the Amigos used, you know, might not sound like a big deal, but when I eventually discovered how underused these characters were in single player, I was disappointed. Also for everyone that was involved with creating these Amigos for this game, from the sound design to the animations to the particles to the modeling to the texturing, all of it. In some ways it's kind of what inspired me to make the weekly character swap series. That way I can really show what the Amigos would have been like if we got more playtime with them. But even with this patch, it's still frightening to think that had this made it into the final or an update, you still would have been restricted to only 2 players with these Amigos, when 4-player multiplayer was planned. And speaking of which, this leads me to
4-player multiplayer.
I've never cursed myself as much as I have now for not being able to play this. Believe me guys, I put in a lot of hours to try to get this to work. I ran into issues installing this patch on hardware, and keep in mind, to get this to work you also need to install the multiple Amigo patch, so that way all 4 players can be used. I ran into controller and charger issues, but then when I thought I had it working, 1 or 2 of the patches didn't install properly. And the fact that I couldn't find which specific patch was not installing properly, it just really didn't want to work, unfortunately. Hopefully sometime soon I'll be able to fully test this out, but from what I've seen it does look pretty functional. I still can't get over how minor patches, even for multiplayer, have been made. From implementing the 2 stages that didn't appear in multiplayer, being Radical Train and Tropical Jungle, to the particle effects from single player being implemented to multiplayer. Because yeah, if you guys didn't know, the multiplayer particles are a bit different to how they are viewed in single player. A lot less is used, mainly so the game doesn't slow down as much. Which, with that said, yeah, I would really love to see eventually a multiplayer particle effect in single player, basically the opposite of what has been achieved. I do know the object behavior is a little bit different, like for example if you destroy a rock, instead of summoning 3 pieces from it, in multiplayer it would just make the entire thing disappear, similar to that of the TGSO5 tech demo's object behavior. Which again, I imagine doing stuff like this would prevent slowdown. Anyway, back to 4 players. I do apologize that I couldn't get around to testing this, but yeah, hopefully soon I'll be able to get to it. But yeah, with that, let's move on.
Jumpdash gravity.
So, to my understanding, all that has been achieved here is the curve, or gravity if you will, has been enabled on the retail Jumpdash, and currently this only affects Sonic and Sonic with Elise. Somehow I kinda had a feeling that this was gonna happen. Probably because the spam attack once affected just Sonic and Sonic with Elise, then eventually Shatter. This isn't a big problem, mind you.
Just have to be a bit more patient.
But yeah, if we are going for that accuracy, for reference, TGSO6 Shatter does have Jump Dash Gravity. I think that probably is my main critique with this patch currently. With that said, there is one more element that is slightly inaccurate to the Xbox Live Arcade demo's take on the Jump Dash Gravity, but not E3. That being, as you are going down, if you dash into a crate, for example, in this demo, basically the crate would get destroyed. Currently this does not happen with the patch. And to be clear, this isn't because of the jump dash gravity. It's literally because they programmed the straight jump dash to behave this way. Probably because you're not meant to be going down anymore. So, an interesting change, but it just goes to show what they did from the course of the E3 to the final builds.
Now loading Fadeout.
So, currently this isn't 100% working, and all that really is the fadeout not showing up from the Sega screen to the next screens, and the title screen to the menu. Though from what we have received, I can kinda see why they got rid of this. I mean, take town missions for example. Most people are just gonna want to skip the dialogue. And because of which, consistently you're gonna have a now loading text at the bottom right in gameplay for the short space of time that you're in this "hey, help me" dialogue. With that said, I am still glad that we got this working, and I do look forward to updates. Though in all fairness, when we got the demo to go into the main menu, interestingly the now loading text is not on top of the menu. So I wouldn't worry too much about that specific. If anything, it's just the now loading text being on top of the Sega and title screen, because again, according to the demo menu, it's even more buried than the final. Speaking of the demo menu, moving on to the
Xbox Live Arcade main menu.
Oh boy, this is the big one, isn't it? How many people have asked me what I thought about this? I'm just glad that I shared the offset of me finding the title screen booting to the loading screen. Because while it wasn't the offset that assisted this patch, it was literally the codes before that helped trace and track down the whereabouts to the main menu of this build. And me posting the offset was literally the day we got booting into the menu in the demo. And to think, all I was trying to achieve was booting into the TGSO6 menu. But instead, we got something better. And holy sh**! There is so much here! With corrected text, we can see roughly how this menu was supposed to look. And this is pretty much exactly how we have seen it from this manual screenshot. And for clarification, if you were playing on the PlayStation 3, instead of saying Xbox Live, it would have said Network.
Can we get a PS3 TGS06? Okay, thanks, bye.
Selecting Xbox Live or Network would reveal ranking and download. Sadly, ranking does crash the demo,
Can we get this working in retail?
which, you know, makes sense that they probably coded it out because, you know, it is a demo. And selecting download doesn't do anything. Huh. Selecting the audio room reveals that the genres are not fully in capitals.
Wonder why this changed in the future.
There's also one extra genre compared to retail, separating the jingles from other, compared to in retail going to other and revealing the jingles there. Within theme, they only have theme of Sonic, theme of Elise, theme of Shatter, and theme of Silver. Interesting how theme of Elise switched from Sonic and Shatter's selections all the way to Under Silver's selection. I mean, it makes sense, but yeah, I don't know, maybe something to keep an eye on. They also don't have the Sweet Dreams, Sweet 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 tracks, which I always thought if we got a version of the menu that was older than retail, there would have been 3 selections, because to my understanding there was a 3rd version, maybe even a 4th, that was either scrapped or just wasn't in the game files of retail, but regardless, none of them are in the demo's take, even if you cycle to the bottom. Within Act, retail has 30 selections, the demo has 31. Well. There's no doubt in my mind, that is Crisis City, Section D, the highway. Don't get me wrong, I know of a couple of other sections that were scrapped, but Crisis City Section D was the main one that made it the furthest into development before being scrapped. I mean, heck, we've got screenshots and footage of it, compared to the couple I mentioned where there's, you know, nothing. Just a shame the text will store if you've been in a genre that has working text, which is also the same for Boss, because if not, the text just won't appear. I'm guessing that this is why when you enter the audio room, the game kind of freezes a little bit before entering. Regardless, you can't expect everything to work, especially when the demo didn't use the menu. Within Boss, retail has 1 extra selection. I wonder which one didn't appear in the demo. Solaris Phase 2, maybe? Since in the text it is separated from the rest? I don't know, just a guess. Within Town, Accordion Song no longer has a selection here, mainly because they had it in the others genre, and Town Mission 2 to 4 are listed as no title. Within Jingle, it's pretty much the exact same as Other from retail, except they didn't have Result. Interesting. I wonder if this is related to the fact that there is no result jingle that plays in the result screen in the Xbox Live Arcade build. The weirder thing about this is that there is actually a result jingle in the files, just unused. And it's not like Accordion where they've moved that to a different genre, because otherwise it would play. I can play all the music that's used in the demo, but I can't play the unused result jingle, or the unused His World theme. So the fact that the selection doesn't appear for either, maybe something to keep an eye on. Finally, in Others, just Accordion Song. Yeah, wow, they really were keen on getting rid of that genre, merging it with Town and Other. They also changed it from Others to Other. Yet, they had Extra, which evolved into Extras, like, huh?
Does that mean Jingle would have become Jingles if that made it into retail? No.
Selecting the theatre room unfortunately crashes, and it was at this point when I noticed that you couldn't actually hold down to get that kind of scrolling effect. But this is when I was using the D-pad. When I tried the joystick, holy crap, the speed! Which, if you guys don't know already, is actually present for cycling through the pause menu selections. Again, only if you're using the joystick. Selecting options would reveal vibration settings, which I'm not really that surprised about, because aside from my Pure 6 review, where I mentioned that all the adventure games had vibration settings, in the final, there is actually some traces of vibration, albeit unintentional, rather intentional. But if you go to switch back to the main character that you're playing as, instead of doing it properly, if you go in front of them and try to switch back, occasionally there'll be times that the character that you're playing as decides to just kind of spin, you know, forever. And it was at this point where sometimes I did notice a bit of vibration. Not much, but it definitely was there. So for this reason, if I were to guess, I would say that it is possible to restore this one day. Selecting gold medal results reveals something that I always remember imagining as a child, because I always found it an interesting decision for them to have the extra stage and all the bosses, having them all be at the very bottom of the list for both the gold medal results and the stage select, instead of being in its chronological order of how you progress through each character's stories. If you cycle over to the last episode's gold medals, I thought this was pretty interesting. To recap, retail shows End of the World, Solaris, achieved S rank on all act missions, and all episodes cleared. 4 categories to clear. The demos menu shows 5. I also find it very interesting that it shows 160 medals here, but in retail it shows 180 medals. I guess the game wasn't big enough. But translating the Japanese text, starting from the top, we have cleared episode, collected all Soliana silver medals, and obtained S rank. So it's possible that what we received in retail for Sonic Shadow and Silver, listed as collected all of Soliana's silver medals, was at one point meant to be listed in last episode. Which, yeah, you can kind of see why they changed this. That just makes me even more curious to want to see the rest of the gold medals for Sonic Shadow and Silver. Selecting either in Trial Select reveals that at one point, the three trio would have had their full name used. Yeah, looks a bit much. I think this is one of the few things that I'm glad changed. Might be just me. In Act Trial, we can really see just how everything would have looked had it all been in chronological order. Yeah, I can see why this changed, but at the same time, I don't mind this for the simple fact that it is in chronological order. I'd even go as far as to say eventually when all of this is in PR6, maybe there could be an option to switch between chronological and retail faithful. So I think it's clear that at this point, the capitals were already starting to dominate. I mean, Ibla's Phase 2 is literally the only one in Sonic's campaign that's lowercase. For Shatter, Tropical Gauntlet Rouge, Mephiles Phase 1, and Mephiles Phase 2 are lowercase. And for Silver, Iblis Phase 1, Wave Ocean Blaze, and Iblis Phase 3 are all lowercase. It's interesting that the extra stages and bosses are mainly what got affected. And even then, some bosses had capitals. Oh yeah, and End of the World is lowercase because, you know, gotta have at least one actor lowercase.
Obviously, it's going to be lowercase.
Selecting a stage would reveal 5 selections, or 5 missions perhaps I should say. Which, okay, this is pretty interesting, because this is how it was always meant to be. Easy, normal, hard, very hard, super hard, and ultimate. But, given the fact that there's 5 here, if I were to guess, I'd say, like the last episode, being unlocked completing the 3 trios stories, I would think that you would have to complete easy to super hard to unlock ultimate. Completing normal technically unlocks hard, so if we assume that had they implemented all the difficulties, and everything from easy to super hard was unlocked as soon as you would complete normal in story mode, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that ultimate would be unlocked if you complete all the difficulties. Anywho, selecting town trial reveals that Sonic in this build only had 13 town missions, Shadow 7, and Silver 10. What's interesting is that all of their values end at 32, despite there not being 32 selections. It also seems that cancelling out of the menu is a bit slower than normal, and even when it loads, it no longer shows the character names, let alone the selection bar behind the text. In Episode Select, aside from the as mentioned selection bar and the character names not being present, not to mention the character models, the progress is at the top, below that is the life count, and below that is the ring count, and while I'm at it, at the very bottom, the silver medal count, all of which are like retail. However, Restart Point and Total Playtime are new additions, and Save Time would eventually go on to become Last Save Time, one of the very few times that it would go from capitals to lowercase. Oh, Sonic Team, how could you? You insult the 06 tradition. And of course, Tropical Jaunty's the default stage. I'm actually a bit shocked that Kingdom Volley isn't. I mean, that was the definition of focus when it came to the 06 trailers and demos, to the point that I'm actually shocked that it's not Sonic's first stage. And I guess there's 2 total playtimes. Cycling over to the last episode, interestingly shows a Tails life icon. Team Attack Amiga? Ooh. I don't know, I would have thought that the question mark would have been better suited for something like this, if they couldn't do the 3 heads that they did in Final. In all seriousness though, if you look at the sprite sheet for the life icons, Tails is the 4th life icon after the trio of hedgehogs, and of course, last episode being the 4th slot, and Tails being the 4th life icon. So my assumption on the matter is it's probably just cycling through all the life icons until the episodes repeat. Now this is where things start to get very interesting. Selecting Tag in Multiplayer reveals Tag Story, a special 2-player story, and Tag Trial, where you can challenge previously cleared missions with 2 players. So I have done a bit of a mock-up video of what the Tag story could have looked like. Long story short, it's pretty much Sonic and Shadow ganging up to get the Chaos Emeralds before Eggman. As far as Tag Trial goes,
Well?
if this is what I think it's implying, then we may have just solved the free mode case. Because even if Tag Story and Tag Trial were only intended to have 2 players in these modes, knowing that you were meant to be able to use all the Amigos in multiplayer, and knowing this now, wow. And to think that I've already hinted at most, if not all the unused Amigo lines being used in a different version of multiplayer. at least all the all lines, where all the Amigos would have been selectable. Being able to select previously cleared missions, as well as being able to select all the Amigos, was already sounding a lot like the free mode that IGN was going on about. I mean, if you really try to imagine this in tag trial, it's actually not that far-fetched. It's getting to the point where I'm actually starting to get convinced that IGN had a review build that contained a working version of this menu with a working tag trial, and potentially, who knows, maybe even a tag story. Oh man, this just got dark all of a sudden. Something interesting to note is that Tropical Jungle is listed as Tropical Savanna. I'm not sure if this was like a late decision change, but I am surprised to see it being used in a build modded to share multiplayer, especially when this build isn't even that far away from when retail released. After you've selected your stage, the fact it shows, yet again, missions 1 to 5 really does tell me that at one point you would have had the ability to use the Amigos in not just previously cleared missions, but in all of the difficulties. Like, I'm sorry, but how freaking big was this game trying to be? Like, what? And to think this isn't even covering the online aspects that were scrapped. Godspeed if we ever receive an E3 build. Finally, in multiplayer, for battle, for the first time ever, the character models are quite a fair distance away from where the camera is, and unlike Tag Trial, where it was originally planning to only use 2 players with all the Amigos, it seems that this is where 4 players was intended to be used, because here we do get to see all of the Amigos. Just a shame we've never officially seen or received all the character logos for the Amigos. Although I do have doubts that this was intended for multiplayer, mainly because last episode had a logo like this. But then I ask myself why in this build it has their full names. I don't know, maybe it was a placeholder. Cycling through each character, the 1P text basically moves to indicate who you're selected on. I remember the first time I saw this I thought it was glitching or lagging, especially since it takes such a long time to load all the character models in one place. Selecting your character reveals a very different screen to what we see in retail. Instead of showing just the stages, here we have Rule, Count, and Stage. Rule can only change from 0 to 1, Count can change defaulting from 5 all the way to 20, before looping back to 0, and Stage can count from 0 to 2. The screen does look a bit incomplete, so yeah, not really sure how this was legitimately meant to look. It could have been anything from how it looks in retail, to a stretched out version of the E3 pause, to even something more original that we have yet to see. Regardless, even if this is a bit incomplete, I do like the more light blue tinge to this menu. Kinda reminds me of how the NTSC J manual looks, which I'm pretty sure did use specific colors and gradients, which, they made black and white for PAL and NTSC copies. What? But with that, that pretty much is everything to cover with this menu. The only other thing I'll mention is that you can actually press the start button, and this does accept things in the menu, compared to retail where it does nothing. Same applies to the results. If you want to skip things in the demo, you can press the start button and it will skip through. While retail on the results, pressing start does nothing as well. Anyway.
Chainjump flips.
So last time I did mention that there was a delay, preventing you from doing another chain jump until that delay expired. This was more noticeable for shorter chain jumps, but with that said, for some chain jumps in Radical Train, if you were spamming it, you could notice the delay at the end slightly. Thankfully this has been removed now. Here's hoping for rotation interpolation updates. So, if I'm not mistaken, as far as chain jumps go, the only thing that could use an update in the future is the jump sound effect being used for Mark Speed Sonic. Or if you include Desko's 2020 normal Sonic chain jump start animation fix patch, try saying that 10 times fast, then also common characters. Since the patch, yes, fixes the animation, but at the cost of muting the jump sound effect. No different to Mark Speed Sonic's chain jumping sound design. Through lure mods, I have been able to get Mark Speed Sonic to use a jump sound effect by swapping certain plugins around, so I'm more than positive that the sound design can be fixed for both.
Xbox Live Arcade Chaos Sphere.
I remember finding an offset a while ago that did actually affect the Chaos Sphere, but I just never got it to go up, and I was quite positive that this could be restored. I mean, because all it really is just reusing the homing recovery state for the spear recovery. But what I wasn't expecting is how with this patch you can now enter the spear state if you enter an air state. which is very faithful to not just the Xbox Live Arcade demo with Shadow modded in, but also the TGS06 demo. Heck, this was even made to be compatible with the Y button patch if you want to have both installed. Once again, an unexpected move, but that much more respectable. You know, it's times like these where I really do wonder if at one point, maybe even in a review build, did they ever use the upward Chaos Spear recovery for boss shatter? Maybe something to think about. I just hope in the future there is a way to merge what we got in the final with this overpowered Chaos Spear. So that way, well, it won't be overpowered. Anything from charging it resulting in the Chaos Spear recovering upward, and tapping it results in the retail effect, to having the first 3 recoveries going upward, but then the rest of the retail effect. Or even, when the spear hits something, an enemy or an object, you go up. But if you miss it, you go down like retail. At this rate, there's better chances of getting more TGS06 states, such as triggering the jump dash out of an air state, aka being able to infinitely jump dash, or restoring and or extending the Chaos Smash failure state, even if that looked a bit oriented-esque.
Super switch delay.
Not much to say here. Once upon a time I removed it with a float. It's individually and permanently a thing now. Also, I get why this was modified in such a fashion where the intro animation has been removed, but in my opinion, in the same way that the final has it so you can only switch after the intro animation finishes, I feel like that should also apply here. I completely understand why this was changed, but for a patch like this that's only meant to remove the switching delay, it just feels a bit inaccurate removing the introduction animation, even if it is supposed to be faster now. At this point we could probably get 2 patches to get the best of both worlds, but nitpicks and nitpicks.
Push off walls.
Okay, let's actually go. This works better than I was expecting it to work, which is weird because I was expecting it to work the way it currently does, but then I changed my opinion later on, and now it's this. Yeah, okay. The reason my opinion changed is because, as I mentioned in the 2020 patches video, if you don't glide at all for gameplay and jump onto a wall and jump off, you will view what originally was the code that was meant to be for Knuckles and Rouge jumping off of walls. And it was when I tried this on this specific Kingdom Valley wall where I distinctly remember it failing with this retail method that shows the way it was intended to work. I'm even starting to think with the Snowboard physics mod that also shows the way this was intended to play, also failed on this infamous wall, because when getting footage for this video, both didn't fail. So I don't know, maybe I didn't try long enough, or maybe there was a specific part of the wall or gameplay that can prevent this from working. Either way, I'm just super glad that this wall can be jumped off of now, and the way it was intended. So let's freaking go. Currently, this is more faithful to the Snowboard push physics, and that currently is my only critique with this patch at the moment. And it's something that some of you guys even pointed out. That being, when you glide out of these push physics, the push momentum gets stored into the glide state, which, while accurate to the Snowboard physics take on it, it's not how the final was meant to behave. If you jump onto a wall, push off, and then glide, kind of like the final, how it disables the push physics is kind of how it was meant to work, only it wouldn't have disabled the push physics completely. In other words, the glide would have behaved normally, not having the push physics stored into the glide state. Regardless, I'm really glad we got this working.
Throw and damage character bosses.
So, ironically, or unironically, you can already do this without patches, simply by timing when you grab and throw the boss, and with a bit of pausing to help you get the timing, you can get this result. At least now, we don't need a strategy to do it. It's just as simple as it's no use. Take this. The frustration of not being able to do what the boss does to you is just as on par with Silver throwing a psychic ball in the cutscenes but not being able to do that in gameplay. So now, man, the satisfaction. Let's go.
Demo trick system.
The fact that some of you guys actually thought that this footage was the Xbox Live Arcade demo when it's just retail with mods is a testament to how far modding really has come. With that said, if you directly compare it to the actual Xbox Live Arcade demo, instead of saying great, like how it currently is with the patch, it would instead say good. Which, yeah, I must say, it would be nice if we could get the good message to eventually appear in the future. This really was a nice way to get more messages to appear, even if it only did increase it by 1. But at least this way it wouldn't be reusing great from the rainbow rings, or radical from the enemies, at least for the first message. Because see, to my understanding, every time you would do a light dash, while the score would go up, the message was also meant to update, but since it starts on good instead of great, since great is the very first message on the sprite sheet, with the patch that currently is more demo faithful, how the trick message goes away when you do a second or more Lightdash, in that respect, I feel it should be demo faithful with the trick message itself having good instead of great. But if we do eventually get a second patch that allows the trick message to update with each Lightdash as it was originally intended, in that case, then progressing from great to good all the way to perfect would be ideal. And in that respect, I'd be fine if the Rainbow Rings Great switched around to saying good to cater to this more intended faithful trick system patch thing. This patch also currently doesn't affect Mark Speed Sonic, which as far as going faithful to what the demo and review builds were aiming for, I think it's probably for the best that this doesn't affect Mark Speed Sonic, because from what I've seen, modding Mark Speed sections into the demo, as well as checking out review build footage, thus far I haven't come across a single clip of Mark Speed Sonic light dashing and triggering a message to appear, or Score for that matter. Would be nice to get a separate patch anyway, but as far as I'm aware, right now, at the time of this video, this is faithful.
Combo text.
So I pretty much explained everything I needed to about how the messages were meant to progress, but for right now, this patch currently has 2 messages, once the uncolored messages in the sprite sheet finish and go to progress into the colored messages. It's very cleverly well done, because I think right now the reason there's 2 messages is because if it was one continued message, the way it was intended, in the same way it does with the score value, updating with each trick, the gradient that's added on to the non-colored messages in the sprite sheet again would get stored to the colored messages, which you can see in some mod videos that have just swapped the messages around in the sprite sheet. Still, I must say, this is actually really impressive. I am very impressed with this patch. Hopefully in the future this can also be merged with the Lightdash trick system, because right now merging the two kind of just confuses the way each trick progresses each message, to the point that it can even lock the trick message once the gradient messages end. But by itself, I really am impressed with this.
Working maturity and levels.
Wow. This is frighteningly close to Pier 6. Like, at this point, I could start to see why people would be convinced that 06 modded footage is Pier 6 when it's not. Like, the maturity even affects the gems individually rather equally, which in all fairness, it probably does behave better being affected individually, allowing for more variety, but as far as accuracy goes, equally was what they were aiming for. This also does store to other sections, which is top tier, let's go. When no gem is selected, the maturity gauge does appear full. I'd be okay if this changed looking like the equivalent of the Xbox Live Arcade demo, where there's just an inch of the maturity meter. If not, then nothing. Whichever works. It also seems to keep the gem level when going back to the menu and then going back into a stage. But aside from that, yeah, honestly, the only real critique I have is the whole equally affected thing. Again, we could probably get another patch to match both, but still, this is freaking amazing as is. It certainly is giving me faith for a better gauge in the future, and I certainly am looking forward to an official release. And with that, this brings us up to speed for 2022. Wow, that is a lot of patches for this year, but maybe it should come as no surprise as it was the 15th anniversary this year. I think for me, there's only really 2 minor patches I'd absolutely love to see in the future. One being a fixed saving system so it behaves more like the PS3 version of the game, where muting the music, then saving, actually does save it if you boot out and back into the game, compared to what we actually got on the 360 build, where if you mute it then save, boot out and back into the game, it's unmute. The weird thing is it does actually save changes to the subtitles and options if you turn them on or off, but yeah, just the audio doesn't save on 360. For the second patch, it's a patch that behaves like the Xbox Live Arcade demo, for when you pause while holding down on the analog. I did actually make a bit of a comparison video a while back, where it shows if you do this in retail, when you unpause, regardless if you're holding down or not, for at least a frame, you are going to be rotated in a different direction. So if you're holding down, for a frame you might see it jump a bit, but if you're not holding down anything, your direction change is going to be more noticeable. It's one of the very few things that the Xbox Live Arcade demo actually got right compared to the final build. And more often than I should, I do pause holding down on the analog. And I believe this is also related to why if you buffer a frame pressing an input, upon unpausing in the final, it re-inputs what you've already inputted, which as a result can lead to fast homing attacks, which can also lead to clipping or launching out of bound results. Compared to the Xbox Live Arcade demo, holding the analog doesn't result in the rotation change, and doubled inputs sure as heck don't happen. Again, it really is one of the very few things that the Xbox Live Arcade demo actually got right, compared to the retail build. But I'm curious about what you guys think. Is there anything you guys might be still hanging out for? Or maybe we've already received it, but you're waiting for updates? Either way, super pumped to see what's in store for next year. So with that brings us to the end of this video. So thank you guys for watching, I hope you all enjoyed and learned a thing or two. Before I go, I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the continued support of trying to fix Earth 6, so it really does mean a lot to me. I'd also like to thank everyone who helped this video reach 1 million views. I literally woke up on Christmas Day to my first video with 1 million views. So this really is quite literally the best Christmas present that I could ever receive from you guys, so thank you. I hope you guys too also had a great holiday season. Thanks again, until next time, have a good one, stay safe, and I'll catch you all next time. Peace.